There was more than a few moves that happened with the Royals over the weekend. Let's talk about each one next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned in to another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. You also can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit the follow button and subscribe. For you first-time listeners wondering what to expect from this channel, well, we broadcast to you 3 times a week now. We'll have about a month to a month and a half of that. But as we've already seen as early as this past week, this will be our 7th episode actually throughout Monday through Sunday here because of so many breaking news stories that happen. I was actually out of town this past weekend, so didn't have a chance to talk about the Maikel Garcia extension. Didn't have a chance to talk about the trade that went down on Saturday night. But moving forward, our plan is to have episodes on Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, and Friday morning. We're going to keep that the same this week as well. We did want to give you the Sunday night episode so you wouldn't have to wait until Monday or Tuesday for me to talk about it. So let's dive right into it here. This was a pretty, I wouldn't say a jaw-dropping move that happened on Saturday, but certainly one that I was not expecting. I know on a Mailbag Friday, we had some people ask about a guy like Isaac Collins, if he made sense for the Royals, if they could afford him. And, I did feel that he was an intriguing candidate, but I did not expect the Brewers to sell as low as they did on both guys, like Isaac Collins and Nick Mears. All the Royals had to give up was Angel Serpa, and I know in doing this podcast a long time, some of you fans are rejoicing because you were not fans of Angel Serpa coming in high leverage moments. What I can say for this deal on both sides, it does make quite a bit of sense for both Kansas City and Milwaukee. Now, I know for some Royals fans, you're going, I don't know how this made any sense for the Brewers. They're getting the Royals' 5th best reliever last season. And even though he's got years of control, he just wasn't that impressive in numerous spots last year for Kansas City. And what I would say to that point, that argument, if you're a Royals fan, is this is not the Brewers' first rodeo. Last year, I remember when they traded Devin Williams to the Yankees, everyone seemed to think that their return was pretty light for a guy like Devin Williams, but they had somebody to replace him, and I believe it was Trevor McGill. So they always have a couple of steps already in motion when they make a deal like this. Now, when it comes to a guy like Isaac Collins, who was 4th in Rookie of the Year voting, Nick Mears had a sub-1 whip, I still feel that's good value for the Brewers. I don't think they were trying to ship them off as bad players, but maybe the return is closer maybe than we might think it is, because they're going to go and try Angel Serpa as a starter. He clearly has, upper level stuff, you could say. I mean, he throws a 96 to 98 mile an hour sinker. He's got a really good slider with good movement. Yes, he can be hittable from time to time, but the Brewers clearly see something in him because they went out there and said, this is somebody we've been trying to get access to for the last couple of seasons. And so now when we go back to those reports of Angel Serpa being linked to some teams and them wanting to try him as a starter, we now know that Milwaukee was one of those teams. And so to give a clear, I guess, picture of a deal like this and why it doesn't just make sense for Milwaukee, it makes a ton of sense for the Royals. And what should excite you even more is that I don't believe this means the Royals are done. I feel it actually means quite the opposite. I feel they are going more than above and beyond in trying to restructure this outfield. So I saw this today when I had put out, a couple more tweets on Isaac Collins' numbers. I had a couple Brewers fans go, don't know why they're so high on him. He was unplayable in the month of September. He was the Brewers' 5th or 6th best outfielder. And while I would push back a little bit on that, I can understand why some people view it that way. Sal Frelick, Jackson Chourio, Christian Yelich. I mean, you could make a case that he's more on the outs for that outfield going to 2026 than he would have been an everyday starter. In Kansas City, you don't need to be picky about those numbers. You go over the course of his entire year last year, which stretched 130 games, and that is a bat that is a significant upgrade for the outfield. So even though he had one poor month, he's a switch hitter with good defense, gets on base a lot, and doesn't chase many pitches out of the zone. That is a perfect option to lead off for the Royals. He can hit toward the bottom of the order, but you've got really good defense out there and left. In fact, he had the fourth best jump among outfielders last year, next to guys like Pete Crow Armstrong and Ceddanne Rafaela. So you're getting great defense in left field. He swiped 15 bags last year. He's not going to have a ton of pop, but when you have a switch hitter there, really good defense, and he's got 5 more years of control, you're liking what you have there in Isaac Collins. And he is more of a late bloomer. He's 28 years old, or 28 or 29. So him being a rookie of the year, top 4 finisher, he's not some 22, 23-year-old kid. He is more of a late blooming prospect, but really put up good numbers in his second season in the big leagues and really his first full season in the big leagues. So to get him, and then Nick Mears, who I do feel is a good pickup for the Royals for a number of reasons. You're trading away a reliever. You want to immediately fill one of the holes in the bullpen. And even though Mears is not a lefty, I feel very confident they're going to go out there and try to sign another lefty for the bullpen. You get to add somebody that can be one of your high leverage guys. And, you can point out certain stretches for relievers where they weren't as good. And I know for Milwaukee fans, you look at the way he finished the year and the prior years before that, he is by no means a Lucas Erceg type get. He's not even a Carlos Estevez type get. He is somebody that can maybe take on more of the role that John Schreiber had last year. Maybe he could be your 7th inning guy. I kind of thought about him being the replacement for someone like Hunter Harvey, so more durable. He's got a really plus pitch in his slider, gets a very high chase rate, so that's good news as well. J.J. Picollo brought up his fastball, being one they're going to enjoy working with. And I feel the Royals have the benefit of the doubt in looking at guys like this and finding value in them. This guy could have had a 6+ ERA, and I still would have been intrigued by some of the advanced metrics that he had. But I do feel at the end of the day, this is a good win for the Royals and what they're acquiring. And we'll talk more in segment number 3 about what is going to be next for this team. But as things stand right now, you've got a platoon option for Kyle Isbell in center field. You've got a left fielder that had an OPS plus that would have been second best on the team last year, or I believe if it's not second best, then it's third best behind Vinny Pasquantino, I want to say it would be. He might have been slightly ahead of Maikel Garcia, or maybe slightly behind Maikel Garcia and ahead of Vinny Pasquantino. I had to go look. We know for sure he'd be top 5, and the numbers were great in Milwaukee. And even when you put or factor in that ugly September for him, he ends with a near 370 OBP. Again, the OPS plus to WRC plus, well above league average, and good defense in left field. I feel that's a good option for the Royals to start in left field, but he also has a little bit of utility to him. He can play some second base, he can play some third base, and you get a reliever out of it too in Mears. This does feel like one of those sneaky moves that when we revisit it in June or July, I feel that both sides might be pretty pleased with the outcome. I mean, if Angel Serpa makes the Brewers rotation, that's some high praise for him because it's a Brewers team that was the number 1 team in the National League. And that's also the other point to it when I saw more so the Brewers fans saying, well, those actually aren't that great of players that we sent over. It is a little bit different when you've got an elite offense, a loaded outfield, and you can trade away those type of players. For the Royals, they would have killed to have someone like Isaac Collins on the roster last year to be their everyday left fielder. It would have taken a ton of pressure off of someone like Jack Caglione. It's the same way with the Royals pitching staff. If they trade Stephen Kolek, there might be somebody that is going, why are they trading Stephen Kolek for this guy? Well, the Royals have a ton of pitching and pitching that they can move for a bat. And so when you have that abundance of talent, you're all right parting ways with it. And the Brewers always seem to find somebody like an Isaac Collins in that lineup every single year. And even if there is some slight regression, which there's a chance he could regress, he's more of a late bloomer, really burst onto the scene last year. But if he does regress a little bit, I feel you're still getting good value in one of those outfield spots because he's so good defensively and he could be a league average bat. You've heard us say it before. I'll say it again. Kyle Isbell has been that guy we've all turned to and said, be a league average bat, and you are an incredibly valuable outfielder, and he could never be a league average bat. You got Isaac Collins, who can handle left field, can play a little bit of second and third, a switch hitter, a bat that can get on base at a 360 to 370 clip. It's why it's a bit different than the Jonathan India deal. Because Jonathan India, he had to get on base because that was really the only thing that stood out about his game. He was hitting below 250 in his final year in Cincinnati and an offensive ballpark, one that favors the bats. And yet, when he comes to Kansas City, it was a letdown, but you're really only banking on him to get on base. He didn't have good defense. He didn't hit for much power. You were getting for a guy that could hopefully continue that walk rate, and he didn't really do that. For Isaac Collins, if the offensive numbers regress a little bit, you got good defense, you got good speed, you got a switch hitter, you got him for 5 years of control, and you got another reliever on top of that. Nick Mears could be somebody that regresses too, but I feel to have him as that extra throw-in, and all you gave up was Angel Serpa, Serpa may go and kill it in Milwaukee. They've been able to turn a lot of mid-level relievers into good starters out there. But I feel that you did get two nice pieces to work with and two pieces that should have a pretty big role for this club going into 2026. What were your initial reactions on the trade return for the Royals that went down on Saturday night? You let us know in the YouTube comments below. When we come back, the other big storyline we didn't have a chance to talk about was Maikel Garcia landing a 5-year extension in Kansas City. What did we make of it? We'll tell you next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. Well, the other story that we didn't have the chance to talk about until right now, and I've said it before last week, that I find it so humorous that we went above and beyond in getting the 6 episodes before Friday afternoon because the Lane Thomas news happened. We did the emergency episode. I was going out of town. And then as I'm at work getting ready to leave and head out of town, Maikel Garcia signs its extension, knew I wasn't going to have time to talk about it. And then the very next night, they make a trade for 2 players that will be on their roster in 2026. And so I thought to myself, let's just do an episode on Sunday night. We won't have one tomorrow unless some breaking news happens again. So you can plan to hear us next week, Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, and then Friday morning, which will still be our Mailbag Friday. To dive into the Maikel Garcia extension, for starters, I did make my pick that I thought Vinny Pasquantino was going to be the first one to get that extension, give him a little bit of a pay raise after the season that he put up. He is, certainly the vocal leader of this baseball team. You've got the Pasquatch in left field on top of the Hall of Fame. You're selling his jersey. There's merchandise all over the store, the bobbleheads, and he's still not making a ton of money. Now, does the Maikel Garcia extension rule out a Vinny Pasquantino extension? I don't believe so. I still feel that there is a chance that they do give him some form of an extension before the team shows up to surprise Arizona in February. But as for the numbers that Garcia got, he will make $4 million in 2026, which would have been his first arbitration year. He'll make $7 million in 2027, $10 million in 2028, $13 million in 2029, $19 million in 2030, and the club option is for $21 million in 2031. So that was from Andy Rogers of MLB.com with the numbers, kind of the breakdown of this 5-year extension worth $57.5 million. So you, of course, take care of the arbitration years. You give him that club option in 2031. I feel it's a win-win for both sides. Maikel Garcia was looking for an extension, believe he wanted to stay in Kansas City, and the Royals wanted to make sure that they locked down their left side of the infield for the foreseeable future. And kind of in the same way we discussed it with Isaac Collins, what makes Maikel Garcia so great is there's not as much pressure on him offensively. He's so good defensively that if he does hit 260 this year and gets on base at a 330 clip, he's still going to be a very valuable third baseman. It's a step back over what he did in 2025. But when you're paying somebody upwards of $10 million, and that's more so on the next couple years of his deal, but you're paying somebody anywhere from $10 to $15 million, and you know that they're no longer that spunky player who's barely making any money and you just find him so easy to root for because he's doing it for the love of the game. It's what we all do as fans, right? We love a certain player when they're not making a lot of money and they're really being the star of that team. And the minute they get that extension, that pressure turns up a little bit. We saw it with Alex Gordon. We saw it with some of the pitchers they gave big-time deals to. The minute everybody knows that you're making a lot of money, that's when that pressure starts to mount. And for Maikel Garcia, I have no doubt in my mind that he's going to be able to handle that type of pressure. But from a baseball standpoint, I feel that for a guy that is so elite defensively over at third, you don't need to be the 330 hitter who drives in 120 runs. I look at someone like Vinny Pasquantino, even though he's improved significantly over at first base, you give him the extension and he makes north of 10 to 15 million a year, your pressure is all on offense. You can live with average to slightly below average defense at first if you have 30 home runs and 110 RBIs. Everybody is going to be just fine with that. Same goes for Jack Caglione if they choose to give him an extension way down the road. If he's an average to below average defender in right field, well, as long as you can hit 30 to 40 bombs a year, we're going to be able to live with it. Whereas guys like Maikel Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Isaac Collins, and Kyle Isbell for that matter, that the offensive numbers matter. And Bobby Witt Jr. is maybe the outlier here because he is an MVP caliber player and he can hit 330. But for the other guys, I feel that if you can play that elite defense and be a league average bat, you're still getting your money's worth there. Now, I understand coming off of last year, people are going to want Maikel Garcia to be a top 3 player on this team. And I still believe that is the goal for him. Otherwise, they wouldn't have given him an extension like this. But to have your infield pretty much locked up other than second base for a long, long time, you feel good about building around that core. This is definitely the new core in Kansas City. Salvador Perez entering the final years of his career, but you got Carter Jensen, right here in Kansas City now. You've got Jack Caglione. Maybe you consider Isaac Collins to be a part of that future because he just came over. He's got multiple years of control, so you know that he's not going anywhere anytime soon. You feel good about building around that core. And this goes back to the Royals' change in philosophy, if you will. I feel that when J.J. Picollo took over this team, it's not that you need to give your extensions to every homegrown player that you have, but I feel the extensions they've given out, they have been, before the timer had hit 0, right? When we saw it with Hosmer and Moustakas and Kane and Escobar, that final year where they all were going to be free agents, it was just, that was the deal. They were going to let them all walk, except they brought back Escobar and Moustakas on 1-year deals, but they knew they weren't bringing Kane back. They knew they were probably not bringing Hosmer back. And it does feel a little bit different. It feels like a different era in Kansas City, where instead of waiting until they're going to be free agents, you take care of that extension right now. Maikel Garcia wasn't going to be going anywhere over the next couple of years, but now you've given him that reason to stay if he continues to be a great player. You're not going to be able to pay everybody, nor should you, but to get the extension done with Bobby Witt Jr., to do that minor extension to give the slight pay bump to Cole Reagan's last year, I feel that's in good faith. J.J. Picollo and John Sherman working together to make sure these guys are rewarded, but you're not doing deals that are just absurd, in my opinion. Like, I remember when the Hunter Dozier deal went down, it felt a bit odd because he had really only done it once at the big league level, and his bat, though good, was really the only glowing part about his game. And it was a 4-year deal for a guy that was soon to be 30. He was making a good chunk of change in that contract. It was risky. It didn't work out. The Salvador Perez deal felt a little nerve-wracking at the time because of his age, because of how we thought he might regress, but he ended up, I think, living up to that contract. He played pretty well over the course of that 4-year deal. Now they've restructured it a little bit. With Maikel Garcia and a 5-year deal, he's 25. He's entering his prime here. And if last year is an indication of what he might be over the next couple of years, I don't believe that you are breaking the bank financially, right? You are doing a pretty good job of making sure your core is in place. And now it's about developing and building around those guys. That's how you keep the window open as long as possible. And I know for a lot of people, Maikel Garcia was one guy they wanted to see get that extension done with. Next up for me is still Vinny Pasquantino, and I still feel that it is possible they get something done before spring training rolls around in February. What were your thoughts on the Maikel Garcia extension? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. When we come back, what's next for the Royals? They've signed a platoon bat. They've traded for an outfielder and a reliever. What's the next box to check off? We'll tell you next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcasts. We will be back on Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, and Friday morning, but keep in mind that from now until about mid-February, we will be doing just 3 episodes a week. But as you can already tell from this previous week, if breaking news happens and we're able to be by this computer and we're able to do a podcast, we will be sure to get it done. But the plan each and every week will be to do 3 episodes a week. So this past weekend, we get the news of Maikel Garcia's extension and the trade involving Angel Serpa, Isaac Collins, and Nick Mears. And I feel for a lot of people, the trade on Saturday might have registered to you as their big move. This was going to be the move for the outfielder they've been talking about. They didn't really match up with the Red Sox or the Angels or the Cardinals. It's just not in the cards. I feel that's actually not the point whatsoever. I don't believe that's the angle the Royals are taking. I read Andy Rogers' article this morning on the words that J.J. Picollo had to say in acquiring these players and maybe what's on the horizon. He said, this does not take us out of the running by any means, but it also puts us in a spot where we don't have to make a move. And though that might rub people the wrong way, Isaac Collins being this team's starting left fielder, when you didn't have to give up any of the major starters we've been talking about for months on end, it's not the worst thing in the world. But I can sit here in this chair and feel confident that I don't believe they're done in adding to the offense. I still feel there's a chance they go out there and add another bat to help out this outfield. Because right now, you feel good about a platoon situation with Kyle Isbell and Lane Thomas. They're counting on Jack Caglione to be a big piece of this team in 2026. Isaac Collins significantly raises the floor of your outfield, where if he's that opening day left fielder, you're not going to have too much pushback on it. But I still feel there's a chance to upgrade this team in center field, where, yes, you can have Lane Thomas as a platoon guy. Kyle Isbell's still on this roster. But I go back to maybe a month ago, and there was a report out there from ESPN that the Royals had been very underwhelmed by the returns for Chris Bubic. And I don't believe they were bad players that were being discussed. I don't believe that Chris Bubic was being thrown out there by the Royals and then all these teams were coming back with 4th outfielders or AAA guys. I don't believe that to be the case. But before acquiring Isaac Collins, they didn't have a starting left fielder. They didn't have somebody they could turn to and say, well, if we don't get this deal done, we got John Rave and we feel good about John Rave. Or we've got Michael Massey and we feel good about him. They were never going to do that. So acquiring Isaac Collins takes a little bit of that pressure off of you got to have a home run type of deal. You got to get it done no matter what it takes. I feel now you can revisit the Chris Bubic conversations because I just feel he's been thrown out there so much where I'm not sold he's going to be on this roster in 2026. I still believe it's a real possibility that whatever discussions they were having pre the trade with the Brewers, they can go back to and maybe strike a deal where now that player might make a lot more sense to add to this outfield, where maybe you could find your everyday center fielder. And again, to bring up another article that Andy Rogers did this offseason, and she's done a good job of having those conversations with J.J. Picollo. He said an impact bat is important, but if we're not able to land that impact bat, we'll feel fine if we can add a couple of those guys that are high OBP guys and can really lengthen out this lineup. I believe that could be the conversations that are being had right now. We couldn't get Jarren Duran because Boston will only trade him for Cole Reagans. You don't want to do that. Maybe you want Brendan Donovan from the Cardinals, and I certainly would as well. It feels unlikely now, considering he would be the second baseman, and now you're paying Jonathan India $8 million to be on your bench full-time. Maybe you're fine with that. I just feel for a guy that can only really play that position and handle it, to have him on the bench for $8 million feels like bad business. I feel you could really turn to center field and say that was a weak spot for us offensively and has been for 3 years. Maybe we could move Chris Bubic now, get that center fielder that we're hoping for, move Isbell and Lane Thomas to your 4th and 5th outfielder, and now you've got 2 guys that are above average bats in center and left, and it takes a heck of a lot of pressure off of Jack Caglione to be a difference maker. He still needs to be one, but whereas last year he had to be the guy. When they called him up, he was supposed to be the solution, and now he can kind of, fall into the background a little bit, do his job for sure, but I feel that's the best way of getting him, good and productive at bats. You have better hitters in the lineup. He'll see more pitches to hit, and you're hoping he and Carter Jensen can drive the bus a little bit in that middle of the order. But that's where I'd turn to next, as well as I'm 100% confident they'll be adding a left-hander reliever, not just because they said it, but also because Angel Serpa was dealt last night. So you're going to be down 2 lefties now from last year's bullpen in Sam Long and Serpa. It's got to be through free agency. You're hoping you can get it in the ballpark of $5 to $6 million where you're not overspending. And then I would see if you could open up those trade discussions again and getting another outfielder, because you almost want to be overly cautious about your outfield. And what I mean by that is you want to ensure that you've got tons of depth out there, where it's not putting all of the eggs in the basket of one player. If you go out there and get Isaac Collins, well, he needs to be the difference maker, right? This guy who was 4th in Rookie of the Year voting needs to be someone who can get on base at 380, and he's going to hit 275, and he's going to be a 4-WAR player in left field. That's doing too much. And the really good teams out there, and I feel the Brewers are one of those teams, it's what they did so well last year. They just had depth all over the place, and not all of them were expensive. But when you just have multiple guys who could be an everyday player, you're going to have an offense that is just fine. And that's what I would pivot to next. And that's why I don't believe the Royals are done whatsoever. You need to get that impact back. You need to get that middle of the order thumper that can drive in over 80, 90 runs. I don't want to close the book completely on a guy like Teoscar Hernandez, but he does only play left field. And I would probably want Isaac Collins playing left field because of that defense. I know he's a utility guy, can play second and third, but he's probably not going to be doing that as often as we might think because he's so good defensively in left. And if India plays well and Garcia plays well, they're going to be in the lineup more often than not. That's why I turn to center field. You could go with Lane Thomas and Kyle Isbell, but those guys are not sure things. We know Lane Thomas can hit lefties pretty well, and that's fine, but he's not going to hit them that well if he's still banged up from last year. Kyle Isbell was basically a platoon guy last year. He's got good defense, but the sample size is out there now. We have seen enough of Kyle Isbell to know that he's never going to be a league average bat. So what if you went out there and tried to find a bat you could play every single day or close to it in center field, and then you kind of have those guys in Lane Thomas and Kyle Isbell that can play a good bit of the season, but they are strictly going to be seen as platoon bats and defensive replacements. Now, that would be quite a bit of a surprise to everybody out there with the Royals being so aggressive and continuing to bolster the outfield. But when you've been bottom of the league for the last couple of seasons, at some point, you're going to have to make that change. You're going to have to make a difference with the guys you're acquiring. And the fact they already got one well above average bat for left field and all they gave up was Angel Serpa, you've still got bullets in the chamber here. You've still got some guys you can move for good value offensively and feel confident. This is the important part. And feel confident about who you have in the rotation. You can hang on to Reagans. You can hang on to Cameron. If you flip Bubic, you still got Bergert and Kolek. And now you got 2 outfielders that are above average offensively. You pair that with an offense that's now locked up its left side of the infield. You're counting on a bounce back from Jonathan India. You got Vinny Pasquantino. Carter Jensen is set to have a big year. There are a lot of things to like about this offense, but just because they acquired an Isaac Collins to play left field, it doesn't mean they're done. I still feel they'll evaluate the market, but to give you my brutally honest answer, they're going to continue to search. But if it doesn't match up with what they really want to do, then I don't see them pulling the trigger. But there are still trade discussions to be had. This just gives you more comfort, more reassurance in knowing they have made some big moves, or at least we'll just call them good moves, to improve this offense a little bit. There's a ways to go, but it's a good start. And I know everybody was getting antsy and they were getting restless. These are the moves that can keep you pretty satisfied for a couple weeks, if not a month. Now, if a lot of time goes by and we're still waiting for that big time addition, then maybe you can be frustrated again. But I feel they got some really good value in Collins and Mears. You only give up on Angel Serpa. You're going to be replacing him likely through free agency. And maybe you can go back to discussing a trade with Chris Bubich and getting another outfielder in a deal like that. I feel that might be the best course of action. And I certainly was caught off guard with the Maikel Garcia extension and the trade that happened Saturday night. So I'll continue to be on my toes. But as for this weekend, I give it an A weekend for the Kansas City Royals. Do you agree with that statement, or do you feel better or worse about the moves they made on Friday and Saturday? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. That'll do it for our special Sunday night edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Now, before we say goodbye finally for our 7th episode of the week, did Locked On Royals make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on video, we send you the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On MLB. Until Tuesday morning, you take it easy, Kansas City.